Okay, the final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 14749 in the name of Craig Hoy on findings of the cross-party group on beer and pubs report. What does Brand Scotland mean for the Scottish beer and pub sector? The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Craig Hoy to open the debate around 7 minutes. Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and apologies for being slightly preemptive there. I was keen to let everybody get out for an early pint. I'd like to start by saying thank you to those MSPs from across the Chamber who supported the motion, and to everyone who joins us now to discuss what is a very important topic, particularly ahead of the budget announcement from the Scottish Government tomorrow. I would also like to thank the Secretariat and the membership of the cross-party group on beer and pubs, and our members and the supporting groups for their support and engagement in the production of the report that we will discuss today. As convener of the group, it is great to have this opportunity to share some of the findings of our report, which focused on what Brand Scotland means for the beer and pub sector. And at the outset, I'd like to say that I will talk largely to the report, but I will also make some reference to both my party's policy and perhaps some personal views that I hold in relation to the future of the sector. Because the pub and hospitality sector is absolutely vital to the Scottish economy. For example, the GVA from the beer and pub sector alone is £2.3 billion, and it supports over 65,000 jobs across the country. There are over 100 breweries and nearly 4,500 pubs in Scotland. And as part of my party's Save Scotland's Pubs campaign, I have now undertaken to do a brief tour of Scotland to visit a pub and to pull a pint or to pour a dram in a village, town or city in every Scottish parliamentary region in the coming weeks. Because pubs are vital places for people to socialise and to meet, to generate a sense of community, and they also have significant wider social benefits. They create social benefit, including supporting cultural events like open mic nights, quizzes, storytelling events and other social and professional occasions. And it's not just the arts and sports that are supported. Many grassroots teams are supported both financially and otherwise by the sector. For example, across the UK, pubs raise over £40 million for grassroots sports every single year. And if you go into my own region, to the Victoria in Haddington, you'll see firsthand how much support the local publican Craig Douglas and his team give to Haddington Athletic Football Club on a match day. Craig is a great friend to the High Highs, and if you haven't been in Haddington recently, then I do encourage you to visit to see Craig's Christmas lights. You could probably see them from Edinburgh at the moment, but I would recommend you visiting and having a pint with Craig and the team there, because pubs are places where people meet, where someone who has no one else to talk to might go to, who will find a listening ear, perhaps to get the only hot meal that they get in the course of the day, where people can sit and sometimes in the warmth when their house is freezing cold, where friends can chat, where new friends can be made, where you can play games and gather for any other occasion, some very happy occasions, sometimes sad occasions too. But pubs release £9 in additional social benefit from every £1 invested in the hub projects. And all this plays into three key themes that our report has identified. It finds that beer and pubs are great places to trade with, to visit, a place to work, and they're important in making a place to live. And in my own village of Gifford in East Lothian, one of our two pubs, the Goblin Hall, has closed for the second time in 12 months. And I've urged and encouraged the holding company Iona to engage with the community who are rightly concerned about the loss of this asset, because some pubs are heritage pubs. They are vital to the community, and they're intrinsic parts of the fabric of both the place and its people, not least the Goblin Hall, which occupies almost two-thirds of the main street in the village. And its closure, therefore, like many village pubs across the United Kingdom, is felt more widely and more severely by those regulars and the visitors and residents. And in this case, I would be happy to engage both with the local community and the holding company to ensure the pub is not lost. And personally, and there was legislation to this effect at Westminster, I believe that pub ownership companies do have a special responsibility to protect heritage pubs, and where no tenant can be found or the premises run the risk of lying empty for a considerable period, there is merit in making the case that the holding companies should not simply retain the buildings and the asset for long periods, when there are other practical and viable options, such as a sale to the community or where an owner-manager can be found, providing there is no change of use. And when taking evidence for our report, some key themes kept cropping up. Publicans and industry experts all felt that the sector is essential to Brand Scotland because of these core themes. They understand what the pub sector means to Brand Scotland, because 3/4 of visitors that come to Scotland visit a Scottish pub and drink a local beer. And those businesses know the value of their exported products as well. And they are a critical cog in the wider Brand Scotland machine and also in the Scottish economy. Deputy Presiding Officer, this report cannot stress enough the importance of the sector, not only to Brand Scotland, but also to Scotland as a whole and to the communities they serve. Then this is often something that goes unrecognised and unappreciated. And it is a shame that this is a sector that is repeatedly targeted by taxes and is sometimes stigmatised as a bad thing for Scotland, when, as the report repeatedly mentions, it is in fact, in most instances, and for almost every instance, the opposite. And I think in recent years, and I would implore the Minister ahead of the budget to think about, that there has been a sense that this sector has been left out in the cold by the government that they hoped would have their back during the very tough times we have seen recently. The deposit return scheme, the consultation on marketing and sponsorship, and the lack of rates support. And many pubs are now looking... I won't give way on that point.
John Mason.
I thank you very much for giving way, and I think he knows what I'm going to say, because this is why I dissociated myself from the report. And I agree with almost everything he said up till now about the value of pubs, but would he accept that some are packed out and very profitable and do not need business rates relief, whereas others might need it?
Craig Hoy.
I accept that, but also I think, as Mr Mason heard during the course of the inquiry, many pubs that appear to be very, very busy and are packed out still have significant pressure on margins. And a busy pub is not necessarily a profitable pub, and that was something that we repeatedly heard during the course of our evidence. And that is why the closure rate of Scottish pubs, sometimes iconic Scottish pubs, is now twice the rate of the rest of the UK. And that is something that I think should be a significant concern, both for the Labour government but for the SNP government, because pubs can be part of the growth story of our country, but when they close they are unlikely to reopen in many instances. And that's why pubs now do need a shot in the arm. And I think the UK budget in respect to the national insurance contribution is something that is concerning the hospitality sector, and also the government's failure to date, although I'm always hopeful that the Scottish government may now finally pass on the rates support relief that they have been getting in the last 3 years from the UK government. So the CPG's report is a solid piece of work, and one that if the Minister and members have not yet read, I would encourage them to do so. I just want to close by mentioning my own party's submission to the budget tomorrow, which is a call for 100% rates relief to be passed on to Scotland's pubs and restaurants this year, because we've all heard stories of pubs that are struggling or closing in our areas. And imagine what 100% rates relief just for next year alone could do. It would be indeed transformative. So my message in closing, Deputy Presiding Officer, is that we must support the industry, because once pubs close last orders, and they simply do so in many instances for good, and they do not reopen. And everything that they offer is lost from now into the future. So we owe it to those, we owe it to our pubs in our constituencies to visit them, to support those who work in them, and to support the communities who benefit from them. If we come together, we can save Scotland's pubs, and that's what we should be doing as we pull together over the course of this festive season. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hoy, and I wish you well with your selfless pub tour of the country in due course. We now move to the open debate. I call Ben Macpherson, to be followed by Graham Simpson. Around 4 minutes, Mr Macpherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I want first of all to pay tribute to Craig Hoy and also the cross-party group on their work and the stakeholders that have supported them in their work. And, well, I don't know how you're going to choose one pub in Edinburgh, Northern and Leith, but I can give you plenty of recommendations. There's a plethora of wonderful pubs and bars in my constituency, which I'll say more about shortly. And with regard to the Goblin, I have very fond memories. 20 years ago, doing a charity walk from Edinburgh to London and spending some time in Gifford on day 2. So I wish those involved with Saving the Goblin all the best as well. It's a great place from memory. As well as everyone else in the chamber, in terms of knowing the importance of the pub, bar and brewery industries for our communities, in terms of being in them and also what they do locally and their engagement with breweries, which I'll say more about in a minute. The points that have been raised about employment, I think, are really important. The figure that was quoted is 65,000 jobs across the country. And every one of those jobs is not just economic activity for that individual. It's not just the GVA. It's not just the vibrancy that business then brings to the community. But for many of the people in the beer and pub industry, it's a career, and it's an important area of expertise that should be greater valued, in my view, in the UK, in the way it is in the continent, for example, when people are bartenders or work in restaurants. Working in hospitality has more prestige, and actually it can be very skilled and very knowledgeable, and we should value these skills and that knowledge. But also for a lot of people it can be transient too, and that is an important aspect of our economy and our workforce. I think to my own career and the time I spent working behind a bar, and how many skills from that time I bring into this job. My interpersonal skills were developed in that trade. Teamwork, productivity, practical working systems. All of these things can be learned working in the hospitality industry, and we shouldn't underestimate that effect that it has on individuals. The motion rightly states that pubs and breweries provide a range of benefits, including preventing social exclusion, boosting tourism, supporting local festivals, music, arts and sport, and as a catalyst for local events and charity fundraising. And in Edinburgh, Northern and Leith, which I have the privilege of representing, that is absolutely the case. For particular pubs and bars, but also for the 5 breweries, the 5 bigger breweries, actually some micro ones too, but the 5 bigger breweries of Pilot, Coldtown, Campervan, Newburns and Moonwake, all of which do really excellent collaboration with local festivals. Some of them have created festivals. They have charity aspects to either supporting charities or some of their funding from their sales going to charities or collaborating with charities. Indeed, on Friday I was at Campervan's tap room at an event that they were having to raise money for the local Citadel Youth Centre, which I mentioned in Parliament last week. So I think that's evidence of the real collaboration that these organisations are engaged in and create. And that importance cannot be underestimated in terms of the Scottish hospitality sector's impact in urban and rural Scotland, what it brings for locals, what it brings for visitors. And the smaller breweries and the pubs and bars are really important for helping local SMEs to grow, because I think sometimes when people talk and perceive the alcohol industry in its widest sense in Scotland, they often think of the big companies. But actually, so many of the businesses working in that sector are small. And that's why we need to be very, very careful when we think about regulation and when we think about policy. And I commend the work of the CPG and look forward to hearing the Minister's response.
Thank you very much. And I call Graham Simpson to be followed by Douglas Ross. Around 4 minutes, Mr Simpson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I start by congratulating Craig Hoy for securing this debate today. He convenes what is probably the most popular cross-party group in the Parliament. It does not struggle to get members attending their meetings, and possibly that's because a lot of the meetings are not held in Parliament. They're held at other venues, shall we put it that way, that have certain attractions. And of course we get to spend time with Mr Hoy. I was very pleased to hear that he's going to be doing a tour of Scotland and will be coming to my region. So if he lets me know the kind of establishment that he likes to frequent, I'm sure we can line something up. Now, you may have seen, presiding officer, pictures of a number of my colleagues pulling pints over the weekend. I was not one of them. I was busy this weekend, but you know, I've got quite a history in the licensed trade myself. My grandparents ran working men's clubs in the north of England, and when I first started work as a journalist, I was lodging in a village pub. What a great place for a young journalist to be, a pub. It's where you got most of your stories. And I developed then a love of real ale, which I've had ever since, I have to say. I recently went to a very well-known music venue in Glasgow, and much as I enjoyed the music, I was left somewhat traumatised after having a very bad pint of beer in that venue, probably one of the worst pints I've ever had. I'm still suffering the taste. I can just taste it now. It was really, really bad. But I have to say that convinced me, just reminded me why I love real ale and really good pubs as much as I do. And there's some really good independent brewers out there, some really good small breweries out there. I'm looking forward to visiting one of the two brewers in my region, the Outlandish Brewing Company, which is in the Motherwell area, and perhaps sampling some of their products like Beamer, Belter, Sonsey and Swally. Great names. Looking forward to having a go at some of them. Craig Hoy, you know, I think the report, it's an excellent report, and it's what cross-party groups ought to be doing. It really shines a light on the value of this sector. And it's not just about figures. I mean, there's some really good figures, but in my own region, we've got 346 pubs. That's supporting nearly 5,000 jobs in the region. We've got total GVA in the sector, 180 million. I could go on. It's a really valuable sector. But I think the important thing is exactly what Craig Hoy said. When it comes to pubs, and particularly local pubs, community pubs, is what they give to the community. I certainly will.
Liz Smith.
I'm enjoying the member's speech. Would you accept that it's not just about focusing on real ale and beer, but on several other drinks? Scotland has a burgeoning interest in the gin market, some excellent new distilleries around Scotland which are doing a huge amount for the sector. And I think, as well as the focus on beer and real ale, I think it's important that we recognise the power of the pub in promoting these other drinks, because, particularly in a woman's case, I think there are more of us who prefer these other drinks to beer.
Graham Simpson.
And you know, Liz Smith is absolutely right about that. And we were talking about a report from the cross-party group on beer and pubs, but pubs offer so much more than just beer. You know, gin is a great example. There are some fantastic local gins being produced in Scotland. Whisky, of course. We can't forget about whisky. So vital to the Scottish economy. I've spoken for 5 minutes. I could speak for a lot longer because it's just so important. So I'll leave it there, presiding officer, but I congratulate Craig Hoy once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Simpson. And I call Douglas Ross to be followed by Daniel Johnson in around 4 minutes. Mr Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and can I congratulate Craig Hoy on securing this debate, on his work as Chair of the cross-party group, and for everything he's done with the report. And to bring it to the Chamber today, I have to say, I've always thought Craig Hoy had the look of a local pub landlord to him. You know, in an alternative career, I think he would be very comfortable behind a bar. And then we find out tonight that he's in training for this new career by travelling around the parliamentary regions pulling pints. And I have to say to Craig Hoy, he is not going far enough. There are only 8 parliamentary regions, but there are 73 parliamentary constituencies, and I'm sure he would be welcome in all of them, including yours, presiding officer, because I was thinking when Mr Hoy said that, if he was coming to the Highlands and Islands or even to Orkney, he could perhaps go to Pomona Inn, which I used to frequent in my young farmer days. It was a great pub which brought many of the local people there, and also I remember we were up for a young farmers event, and the clock had a great habit of just pausing before closing time, which meant that time drifted, and I say that with a former owner rather than the current owners. But it's that type of spirit that you get in a community pub that sadly is being lost in many areas, because so many of these pubs close and then don't reopen, and I think that's why it's important that we as a Parliament and Government do as much as they can to support our landlords, to support these pubs, because they mean so much to the communities that they serve. And when we see them being lost, it is a loss to local employment, to the local economy and to the local area. I think it's also important that Liz Smith made a very valid point there in response to Graham Simpson, that there's more than just beer served in pubs, and as someone who represents, as the Minister does, an area with so many Scotch whisky distilleries, a lot of people go to their local pub to have a dram. And that's why I think it's right that when we have politicians supporting this sector, they're not just pulling a pint of bitter or lager, they're pouring a glass of whisky or a measure of gin or whatever is someone's favourite tipple, because the whisky industry and the amount of whisky consumed in pubs is also extremely important, and that provides a lot of employment in my region. Another area I want to look at is some of the small local brewers. And again, in Murray, we were very blessed to have a number of great companies, but one I want to mention is sadly no longer in operation. Windswept Brewing was a great success for Nigel Tiddy and Al Reid, who set it up. They had a very successful careers in the RAF and wanted to stay locally in Lossiemouth, set up Windswept that went from strength to strength. They won numerous awards for their beers. They set up a tap garden, which then became a 4-star visitor attraction. Sadly, rising energy costs and material costs forced them to close earlier this year. And I think it's a very sad reflection for the state of some of these businesses that, despite all their successes, they couldn't compete against these high energy costs. And we lost a great local business that at its height employed 12 people. Towards the end, was still employing 5 people. And that has a huge impact on the local community and indeed a brand that did well, not just locally but nationally as well. Finally, on the points Craig Hoy was making about our party policy, I think this is absolutely crucial. Our pubs and hotels have been through so much since the COVID pandemic, when they were some of the first to close their doors and some of the last to reopen their doors. I think there could have been more support from both the Scottish and the UK governments for that sector. And I think tomorrow the Scottish Government have an opportunity to finally get back on side with this sector and provide that 100% rates relief, which will make a huge difference. And I know John Mason's no longer here, but I completely disagreed with his point. You can't just look through a window or open a door and see a busy pub and assume it is profitable. Behind the scenes, there are so many costs there that it is not just simply the case if there are more people going through the door, they will be making more profit. It is far more complex than that, and they need our support. And if I have time, presiding officer, I will give way. I'll give way to
Ben McPherson.
Would Douglas Ross agree with me that there's also an appreciation that's necessary now that the hospitality industry, because of a change in the employment law legislation, will be paying, rightly, higher wages, and that creates, for good reason, additional pressure across the margins that these businesses are having to navigate?
Douglas Ross.
Well, I think that's the point. There are so many different pools on the hospitality sector that they are paying more in wages, they're paying more for energy, they're paying more for the stock they buy in, and they cannot possibly pass all that on to the customer, otherwise the customers just wouldn't turn up. So I think they are being pulled in so many directions. If they could get some support from the Scottish Government, I know that would be helpful, which is why it's a key pledge from the Scottish Conservatives. I know you're about to call last orders on my speech, Presiding Officer. I can't believe no one else has used that line to date in this debate, but can I reiterate my thanks to Craig Hoy for bringing this to the Chamber. It's an important issue, and hopefully in the budget tomorrow we can support this sector.
Thank you, Mr Ross. I can confirm that the Pomona has indeed reopened under new ownership. I think the new owners would want me to point out that, notwithstanding parliamentary privilege, the clock in the bar does actually keep normal time and doesn't stop just before last orders. I now call Daniel Johnson to be followed by Finlay Carson. Around 4 minutes. Mr.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think we all know that politics can be an unpredictable business, one full of setbacks and disappointments. And this is a timely debate because just the other week we had the stall in the Garden Lobby representing independent brewers. And it was my deep regret, if not huge disappointment, that Edinburgh Southern has a grand total of 0 independent breweries in a constituency. So I am so pleased that Craig Hoy has brought forward not just this debate but this excellent report, because I hope that the recommendations it contains can rectify that very point. And can I commend him on his selfless commitment to the cause in undertaking the grand tour of pubs across parliamentary regions. Truly a martyr to the cause. But look, I think it's already been mentioned. I think this is a really excellent bit of work. And I think Graham Simpson was absolutely correct. I think we have a huge range of cross-party groups across Parliament. And I think that some of them are less well-attended than others, but to actually have one that is both well-attended, but then also actually producing reports which actually has some serious commentary, both about the immediate steps that government can take, but broader policy steps, I think is excellent. I'm also very pleased to see about the way it approaches Brand Scotland. Because all too often I am concerned that when Brand Scotland gets discussed, it's a sort of a marketing line, a strategy, something that is about what we say about Scotland. But I think Brand Scotland has to go much deeper than that. It has to, I think, provide insights about where we actually have things that are unique, things that we can sell to the world, where we have experience, where we have geography that is distinctive, and where we can provide experiences that no other places can provide. And I think actually at the heart of this report is that deep insight, that there is something about brewing, but also pubs, that I think is distinctive and I think we can build upon within Scotland. And so I think if Brand Scotland is to mean anything, it has to be about finding those sorts of insights and seeking policies that can help develop them. And I think particularly around pubs, if you think about the culture of this country, or if you were to ask people from overseas, what are the things that are distinctive about the British Isles, but also Scotland in particular, I think brewing and pub culture would be one of them. And when tourists come to Scotland, they want to experience pubs. They want to drink Scottish beer in Scottish pubs. So thinking about how we support that, I think, is vitally important for visitor experience and for tourism, not just about our kind of local communities. But I think the report makes an excellent job of setting out precisely all the social benefits, both employment, but also as a place for communities to meet, that pubs can provide. But I think if I make one suggestion for the group's future work, I wonder if brewing in particular could be an area for further exploration. Because I think we have one huge, enormous asset in food and drink in Scotland, which is whisky, and it's already been mentioned. We produce 1.5 billion bottles of whisky a year in Scotland. We export 43 bottles of whisky a second. We are hugely blessed to have a drink category that is synonymous with this country. And I think our challenge is to look about other food and drink categories that we can promote to maybe not have that level of synonymity with the country. I think there are many other countries that would lay claim to beer and wouldn't thank us for trying to do so. But can we push brewing onto another level so that Scottish beers have a niche unto themselves? And I think there are many reasons to think that we could do that. So on top of, I think, the important points around business rates, and I think Craig Hoy made his points well, and certainly our party might not I'll go quite as far as his, but I think certainly some of the benefits of business rates discounts could be extended, and they do have a cap, just to Mr Mason's point. But we should also think about how can we help develop a genuine brewing cluster in Scotland? What are the things that we can do to help skills and education? And what can we do to help investment and innovation in the brewing and distilling sectors? And obviously we have the Institute at Heriot Watt already doing great work, but what more can we do? So I would beg those questions as I sit down and close, given that last orders have definitely arrived for me as well, just to abuse that joke. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. And I call the final speaker in the open debate, Finlay Carson, around 4 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I thank Craig Hoy for bringing this members' debate to the Chamber. I, like Graham Simpson, have roots in the hotel and licensed trade industry, with my uncles and now cousins owning and managing hotels and pubs across the country for over 200 years. From the King's Arms, the Imperial and the Market Inn in Castle Douglas, to once owning the Waverley Hotel just up the road from Emma Harper's home, and Dumfries and the Spread Eagle, and they once owned the Buccleuch Arms in St Boswell's, now run by our colleague Rachel Hamilton's husband. And until only a few weeks ago, the King's Manor Hotel in Edinburgh and the Pitbockley House Hotel in Dunfermline. Groucho Marx once remarked that marriage is a wonderful institution, but who wants to live in an institution? But it's fair to say that beer and pub sector in Scotland is also a fine institution by playing an important role in defining our national identity, whether on an economic or social basis. Of course, the social value of this sector in bringing people together, communities together, while supporting well-being and social inclusion cannot be lost or downplayed in any way. Pubs up and down the country form the very fabric of many of our lives. You don't need to drink alcohol to appreciate the benefits that pubs and hospitality businesses bring to rural and urban communities alike. It brings people together, which is good for our personal mental health. More often than not, leads to social events and festivals being organised at a local or national level, which in turn is good for a visitor economy. However, the headlines from Heineken's recent research with the Marmalade Trust make stark reading, with 500,000 older people going at least 5 or 6 days without seeing or speaking to anyone at all. And with over 1 million people aged 65 plus in Scotland, 2/5 of older people, around 3.9 million, say that television is their main company. It's hardly surprising that 64% of respondents to Heineken's Open Arms survey felt that the pubs is one of the main places to go to socialise, with many feeling that a brief conversation within the pub can alleviate solitude. As we've already heard, beer and pub sector makes a considerable economic contribution to Scotland. According to the most recent report, it generates £2.3 billion in GVA contributions to the GDP, employing over 65,000 people who are paid £1.2 billion in wages. This, of course, remembering that the activities contribute to significant tax revenue to the Exchequer, totalling £1.4 billion in 2022 alone. What cannot be ignored is the fact that this sector provides employment opportunities for young workers, employing nationally 22,000 between the ages of 16 and 24. For many, working behind the bar or serving up food is their very first job. And the brewing and pub sector is a dynamic part of the economy in my constituency of Galloway and West Dumfries. There are a total of 126 pubs in my patch, and while I'm first to admit that I have not visited them all, I am trying my best, please trust me. I know from this that 573 people are employed. There are also 4 local breweries, including Five Kingdoms, based at the Isle of Whittorm, recently named the champion bottled beer of Britain, in the prestigious competition organised by the Campaign for Real Ale. This business, fronted by Alistair Schuller since 2015, has gone from strength to strength. Knowing and recognising the importance of this sector is one thing, but helping it to grow should be one of the key objectives of Brand Scotland. It's worrying to note that the Scottish Parliament's cross-party committee that Scotland is not viewed as attractive for new investment by some businesses. Uncertainty around the promotion and advertising of alcohol by the SNP government hasn't helped, while the current licensing and planning regime is often difficult to navigate and time-consuming. So I wholeheartedly agree that there is need to be a cut in business rates in the short term, while every effort is made to reform it in the longer term.
Emma Harper.
I thank my colleague Finlay Carson for giving way. You mentioned Brand Scotland, and I'm just thinking about does the member think that Brand Scotland could look at the inclusion of women in some of their marketing and social media advertising? As a recent report from Our Whisky said that there's 228% more male pictures posted on social media on Instagram compared to women.
Finlay Carson, give you the time back.
Well, I'm absolutely sure, and you've got that on record, but you know, the advertising agencies will know exactly where the best bang for their buck is spent, but I take on the points you're raising. But more needs to be done to support Scottish produce with more local beers, especially in rural areas, being promoted, because we rely heavily on the tourist trade. And I believe that the role of pubs in local and rural communities should be championed, especially given the pressures being placed on them in recruiting and retaining staff. In conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, this report highlights the significance of Brand Scotland for the Scottish beer and pub sector. The sector has a significant economic, cultural and social impact that we've heard that this evening. It does also identify challenges such as high business rates, regulatory uncertainty and staffing issues. We need to see action on the recommendations to develop a hospitality strategy to support the sector's growth and integration with Brand Scotland, which needs progress on regulatory performance, promotion of local produce and improving employment conditions in rural areas. Presiding Officer, I think we should raise a glass to our pub and beer sector and offer every encouragement, especially financial, to keep them alive in this future. And I thank you for that extra time and the lock-in in the last minute. Thank you.
Get me in trouble here. Right, I now call on Richard Leonard to respond to the debate. Minister, around 7 minutes, please.
Thanks. Richard Lochhead, Minister, about to respond on behalf of the Government. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Just to say, firstly, can I thank Craig Hoy for bringing this motion before the Chamber today, and also to express my thanks to the cross-party group on beer and pubs for the work they have done on this inquiry and for producing this powerful report, which the motion refers to and which I, as Minister, have read in preparation for today's debate as well. And I also wish Craig Hoy well with his pub tour of Scotland's 8 parliamentary regions, as others have done as well. I suspect if that's a perk of being in the cross-party group, that the membership of the group is about to rocket. And like others, I'll happily offer any recommendations for pubs and bars in my own area of Moray or Elgin, where I live, if he so wishes, when he visits the Highlands and Islands. I hope he chooses to visit Moray. In fact, I was reading a history book a couple of years ago about Elgin, and I think there used to be something like 60 breweries alone in Elgin. So this is an industry that has evolved and changed over time. And also that perhaps is a good opportunity to mention that it's important to remember it's appropriate that we're debating this issue in the Scottish Parliament here at Holyrood, because this building is on the site of the former headquarters of Scottish Newcastle Brewery. So there's another link with this evening's debate as well. And I also have fond memories of my time as Food and Drink Minister, where I supported the development of Scotland's craft beer sector. And I think there's now 140 or so craft breweries in Scotland in the beer sector alone. But of course we've seen the expansion of the gin sector in Scotland as well. We've seen the whisky sector thriving. And like others, I welcome the mentioning of the fact that pubs also sell Scotch whisky. Because when I go into a bar these days or a pub, the first thing I look at is the row of whisky bottles behind the bar to see what's there. And that's a major feature of Scotland's hospitality sector, of course, as well. Yeah.
Graham Simpson.
The Minister rightly mentions the number of small independent brewers, which I think over the decades has gone up. But the trend now seems to have gone in reverse. I mean, for instance, in this year alone, there's been a net loss of 94 small independent breweries in the UK and 13 in Scotland. Is that a matter of concern to the Minister?
Minister, I can give you the time back.
Well, as I say, this is a sector that evolves and changes, and as the member explained, this is throughout the whole of these islands, not just in Scotland. That's that small reduction. And of course, what's important is if you compare to where we were about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there's a lot more craft breweries now in Scotland taking advantage of the desire for the consumer for provenance behind the food and drink that they consume and purchase. And the evidence in all the surveys is that customers and consumers, particularly internationally visiting Scotland, will pay more, will pay a premium with this provenance in the craft beers or other alcohol drinks or spirits or food they're buying that's got that story to tell. So I think we should continue to exploit that opportunity, and many companies in Scotland are doing that. So I recognise the concern, but I think we should look at the bigger picture and what's happening there over the last few years as well. In terms of Scotland's pub and brewing sector, of course, as others have said, it's a key part of Scotland's economic fabric, a key part of our society. The report articulates, I think, this very well, and it's helpful to have placed in the context, as Daniel Johnson and others have said, of Brand Scotland as well, to illustrate the impacts on our collective aspirations for our country as a place that's great to live in, to work in, to study in, to visit, and where we can do business as well. And I want to put
Okay, Craig Hoy. I thank the Minister for taking the intervention. Will he make specific or take specific attention to two of the asks of the industry? One is that the planning system is looked at to simplify it so that pubs are not seen somehow as a problem within society, and actually to try and use the planning system to enable the sector. And the other element is the call for a period of calm in the regulatory environment, having had quite a lot of shocks, COVID, but also some government-related shocks, such as the preparations for DRS and also in relation to the possible alcohol and marketing and sponsorship. So would the Minister take those to his ministerial colleagues, both on planning and in relation to a period of calm in the regulatory environment?
Minister.
As I said, I think the report from the cross-party group is powerful, and I think Craig Hoy mentions a couple of important themes from the report there. These, of course, are issues we are always keeping under consideration, and I may touch upon those in the remaining few minutes if we've got a chance to do that as well. But I just want to put on record my own recognition and thanks to all the businesses, small and large, whether pubs or breweries, for the scale of the really positive work they undertake in our country and how they support our communities and our economy, not just in the south of Scotland, as highlighted, and of course, in the motion, but of course right across the whole of the country. It's also an investment in people, where it's providing foundational employment opportunities to our young people entering the workplace and the role they play there, or providing a hub for interaction across all age groups in that social role, or offering a pathway for training and job prospects for those perhaps within the justice system seeking to turn their lives around. And business does need a conscience, and I see lots of examples of that in the cross-party group's report. Examples of that in our pub and brewing sector, and of course I've seen that myself as Minister close up, visiting hospitality and tourism businesses in this country, and also visiting in my own personal life as well many of Scotland's hospitality businesses. It's no secret that businesses in the pub and brewing sector were hit very hard as a result of both the pandemic and the cost crisis, which many members have mentioned. The past 4 years in particular have been arguably the toughest in living memory for this sector, and of course for many businesses it continues to remain tough. We know this is a sector with a strong track record of being resilient in the face of these challenging economic conditions, but we also know there's limits to what businesses can do as well, and it's with great regret to see any business close across the pub and brewing sector, as it is in any sector of the Scottish economy. That has an impact on many fronts, from the loss of local services to the harsh reality of unemployment, as well as the damage to the downstream supply chain for these particular sectors as well. So it is right, of course, that government therefore does all we can to avert such scenarios. If they can't be avoided, we have to work cooperatively with the industry and other partners to mitigate the worst outcomes. We can't do everything, but we do support where we can the sector with limited resources. That includes rates relief, which, despite the challenges, around half of properties in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors have been eligible for 100% relief through a small business bonus scheme and islands relief for hospitality in 24-25. We also, and this addresses Craig Hoy's theme that he mentioned from the report, remain very focused at the moment on how we can have a measured approach to regulation. That is, of course, being considered through the New Deal for Business, as is wider consideration of non-domestic rates issues as well. But beyond rates and regulations, we also know that there's other measures that can be taken as well, and it's investment in existing and new businesses and promotion of pub and brewing sectors at home and abroad that we need to support as well, and support for skills development and careers, and have that long-term vision for tourism and hospitality in Scotland and our wider food and drink sector. As a government, we're fully behind Scotland Food and Drinks Partnership Industry Strategy and their vision for Scotland to be the best place in the world to own, operate and work for food and drink businesses. We've dedicated £5 million to that last year and £5 million this year towards the work on this strategy in the part known as Sustaining Scotland Supplying the World policy. And that's to help move the dial on food and drink growth in Scotland as well. And that funding can help, for instance, brewers to showcase their products to domestic and international buyers, as well as support for staff recruitment, training and retention, and also reducing carbon footprints for the brewing and beer sector as well. I should also talk about a national tourism strategy, Outlook 2030. That is looking, of course, at a longer-term vision for hospitality and tourism in Scotland and is very relevant to this debate as well, and many of the issues in the report. I should say, immediately after this debate, I'm going on the train through to Glasgow to the Scottish Tourism Alliance's Christmas reception, which I'm speaking at, and I see advertised on the programme for this evening as a selection of beers as well. So I'll be sampling some Scottish hospitality and beers, hopefully later this evening. So it's again appropriate to be debating this just now as well. And in terms of Brand Scotland, of course, all our agencies, they align to promote Scotland overseas and around the world and make the most of the Scottish brand. And as members have said, the pub sector, the beer sector, the wider food and drink sector is at the heart of the Scottish brand around the world, and we have to protect that and save it. And we do that through promoting also festivals here in Scotland, and Angus Robertson, the Cabinet Secretary, is working with partners across the festival sector, and that's also key to attracting people to enjoy hospitality in our country. So I can see I'm running out of time, Deputy Presiding Officer, so I'll just say
very briefly,
I'll take a very
Emma
brief intervention and then reach a conclusion.
Thank you for giving way. It's rather than make a point of order. The report that I mentioned in my intervention with Finlay Carson was from Great Drams. It wasn't from our whiskies. But the point still stands that we can still be using women in the advertising and the marketing.
Minister.
I was just going to close, Deputy Presiding Officer, just by saying that our beer sector, our brewing sector, is part of Scotland's identity. It's a very challenging time just now, but we have to work in partnership with the sector to move forward and navigate through that. I see many fantastic new businesses that have been opening in this sector in recent months alone across the country, and we should celebrate that. There's still a lot of confidence in the sector. We still have a lot of people wanting to enjoy hospitality. As we run up to Christmas, New Year and the festivities at the moment, I just want to wish all of these sectors the best of health, and I hope they have great business over the next few weeks, and the people of Scotland stand behind them, just as the cross-party group are doing so in the Scottish Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting of Parliament.